Welcome to Resistance Live. Since 2017, Resistance Live has been the go-to home for political and legal news and analysis through a decidedly progressive activist lens. I'm your host, Elizabeth Cronise McLaughlin. I'm a former Wall Street and human rights lawyer, a lifelong organizer, and a leadership and impact consultant for all those seeking to lead big progressive change in these incredibly challenging times. To get bonus broadcasts, ask questions, and more, don't forget to become a paid subscriber to the show at patreon.com/resistancelive. And to learn more about what we do to help progressive leaders everywhere, check out GaiaLeadershipProject.com. And now, here's today's show. Hello, people. Welcome to Resistance Live for the 16th of October, 2025. We're so glad you're here. We have a bunch of stuff to talk about today, not the least of which is the news that broke late last night in the form of a letter, which I have some questions about, but nonetheless, it says what it says, from the acting director of SNAP. Many of you know that SNAP is the formal program that administers what we used to call food stamps in this country, okay? And what this letter says is that SNAP will quote unquote, run out of money on November 1st. And in fact, it has instructed the states that are allocating SNAP funds, which is pretty much everybody, right? All 50 states, to sit on their allocations starting on November 1st, because there may not be enough money to give people who are starving in this country the benefits that are associated with SNAP within a matter of like 15 days now. It's really bad. And they are, of course, blaming this on the government shutdown. But I just want to give you guys some facts, right? You know that the whole reason why we're here is to educate you all and give you reasons to take action and means to take action. I want to educate you on some facts about SNAP. So this morning, after this news was kind of floating around late last night, I did some research. And the annual allocated budget for SNAP is somewhere between $99 and $102 million, okay? That is like a line item in the defense budget. And on top of it, we have some prime examples right now of the fact that the regime could find this money if they wanted to. We just did a $20 billion bailout. Sorry, I'm misquoting here, by the way. It is $100 billion a year for SNAP, not $100 million. And that means, by the way, that if that's what it is, that breaks down across 12 months. According to relevant math at, slightly, probably roughly around $8 billion a month. Okay. So we now have this very strange situation that's happened with regard to this Argentinian bailout. Okay. We are sending 20 billion of taxpayer funds to Argentina for a bailout, and Trump is seeking private funds from other entities of another 20 billion to send to Argentina. Okay. That's on top of the fact that, yes, as I mentioned, this is literally like a line item in the defense budget. And we've already seen the regime try to rearrange and find pockets of money inside the Department of Defense budget to pay soldiers as of today, to pay people in our military as of today. We could fund, close to half of an annual year of food stamps using that $40 billion. And so, one of the things that I just want to make clear here is that there's a new gamesmanship that has started to be played in the last 24 hours with regard to the shutdown, because the Republicans, MAGA, clearly know that they're losing the messaging game on this. We've talked about this a lot in the last couple of weeks, but the Democrats' messaging on health care has broken through. And also, as others are pointing out, and I have pointed out here, the issue of funding for ICE has actually broken through in really weird ways. We're seeing some previously MAGA-leaning podcasters, some of these bro podcasters, really abandon Trump on the funding for ICE and the kidnapping of our neighbors and the deportation of people who have been here for 30 years who have children, the deportation of grandparents. And so in addition to the fact that the healthcare message is breaking through, there's also a lot of discussion happening within the MAGA base right now about the funding for ICE and whether or not it actually should be operating at all, let alone in the means by which it's operating now on a daily basis. So one of the things that the GOP has to do in the face of this is they have to consider how they're going to try to score points against the Democrats. So the next thing that's coming, just so you're all forewarned here, is that if the government stays shut down in advance of November 1st, we're going to get a whole line of propaganda from the GOP that the Democrats are starving poor people by refusing to come to the table. We've also had John Thune, the Senate Majority Leader, pull a kind of really shady, shenanigan-y thing today. And essentially what he is doing is he is bringing a bill to the floor of the Senate that would require fundamentally for a defense appropriations bill to pass that would result in military families getting paid, okay? And what he is trying to do by doing this is separate and apart from the House appropriations process, because reminder, the budget has to be passed by both the House and the Senate. What he's seeking to do through this is to force Democrats to vote against it, which of course they will, because it's gamesmanship. And then he will blame the Democrats for military families not getting paid. So they know they're losing. And this insistence, by the way, that they don't have the money to pay for SNAP is a part of this setup. But the impact of this is going to be dire. So I have to remind you all that in this country, SNAP benefits have been cut a lot under Trump, okay? In some instances, we're seeing like SNAP benefits being allocated in some states of about $120 a month for families, okay, which is obscene. You know, I mean, that is starvation, trying to feed a family on $120 a month in SNAP benefits. This is going to result in really, really dire circumstances for millions of Americans. Even in the last week, I've had a couple of phone calls with activists who are living on SNAP, who are feeding families with 6-month-old babies and toddlers on SNAP. And the elimination of SNAP benefits is going to result in people essentially starving. So this is the moment where I have to remind you all that, assuming that you are not living on SNAP, my bet is that you've got a few cans of food in your pantry, in your kitchen cupboards that you do not need. Maybe you've got an extra 6 cans of black beans, or you've got a 2-pound bag of rice. Please take that food and donate it to your local food bank today. Because I will just tell you that here where I live, I drive past our local food bank on a regular basis, especially when I'm picking my kids up from camp or something like that. And the lines outside our food bank on the 2 days a week where they distribute have tripled in size since the middle of the summer. And some of that has to do with rising grocery prices. Some of it has to do with the costs of everything getting higher because of tariffs. But this is a situation that is going to force people who are already on the brink to really be in circumstances where they have to choose between things like food and medicine, food and rent. And so our capacity to support our local food banks and to support people who are really living on the edge is more critical now than ever. You can also make a $1 donation to your local food bank. Again, one of the things food banks are really, really good at is stretching that money as far as it can possibly go. So please make sure that you are taking some form of action today, if you have the means to do so, to help keep others afloat. And I have to remind you all that, there have been some studies done that document that the people who tend to give more to the poor, to people who are starving, are people who are already pretty close to the edge themselves. So I just want to remind you all that if you are lucky enough right now to have a stable income, if you are lucky enough right now to have savings, this is a moment where it's incredibly clear that we need to support our own forms of social safety, because people are going to start falling through the cracks. And I can just, guarantee you at this point that the run on food banks, assuming that the budget doesn't pass between now and November, and there's no reason to assume it should, because Mike Johnson is refusing to call back the House of Representatives because it would require him to swear in Grijalva. More on that in a second. All of this is a moment where we all really have to step up. So please, we have some great examples in the comments here on YouTube today of folks doing an extra shopping trip and donating that food to your local food bank. These are the kind of things that people need to be doing right now on a regular basis. All right. So please take action today on that. All right. Let's talk about Grijalva here, because I had a number of questions on the Patreon feed this morning about her swearing in. This is my moment to remind you all that if you are not yet a subscriber to the broadcast at patreon.com/resistancelive, you can join now at 20% off our annual subscriptions using the code FALL2025. That will get you access to the daily question feed. You get to ask me questions for 3 hours before the broadcast. And if I can, I will answer them on the air, or I answer them in writing if I can't. And also, you get access to our weekly bonus broadcast. So do that, okay? That helps to keep us afloat here also. All right, as far as Grijalva goes, her election has now been certified. We talked about this yesterday. It was certified by the Arizona Attorney General on Monday, which was the deadline for this, okay, on the 14th. So Johnson has no more excuses to not swear her in, but he is not calling back the House. Okay, now, for some reason, a number of people on the Patreon feed this morning seem to be under the impression that a federal judge can swear in a member of Congress. That is false, okay? I went and looked at the federal code this morning because there were so many people popping up to ask this. And it actually, the code that people are citing all over the internet for this does not say that a federal judge can swear in a member of the House of Representatives. It simply states the oath of office. I don't know who is out there spouting this, but there's also information in the congressional record, in the House archives. I went and did a deep dive on this morning that indicates that the person who is allowed to swear in a member of the House of Representatives is the Speaker, or the Speaker pro tempore if that Speaker is out of office for some reason, sick, dies, new Speaker has not been appointed. It's the Speaker of the House, all right? In the very limited historical circumstances where it has been someone else, that has been done by unanimous consent of the House, meaning that there's a vote on the floor of the House that says, yes, we are totally fine with, say, the Vice President swearing in this particular member of Congress. That is not going to happen here because the House of Representatives is out of session because Mike Johnson won't call it back. So one of the things that I just have to remind you all here is that we need to continue to put pressure on the Speaker. That means pick up the phone, call his office. Doesn't matter whether he's your representative in Louisiana or not. Make your voice heard about the importance of having her seated. And we also need our own representatives to get very loud about this. So please make sure, by the way, that you are calling your own representative and asking them what they intend to do about getting Grijalva sworn in. This whole thing is like wildly unethical. It's also really unheard of. You know, ordinarily the way this works is that when an election happens, the people who are the people who have won the election are sworn in the next business day that the House is in session, but they've been sworn in even in the interim when it serves the GOP, as we talked about yesterday. We had 2 GOP members elected in special elections in recent years who were sworn in within 24 hours. We are now on day 23 from when Grijalva won her election, her special election in Arizona. So critically important to continue making your voices heard on that and making sure that we get her sworn in as soon as possible. The first day that he calls back the House, he's going to have to do it. And then we're going to have a vote on the Epstein files. But that's the whole reason why he's holding out on this, notwithstanding his refusal to admit that that's the reason. This brings up one other really key thing that I just want to mention about Mike Johnson. And I have to say that I am finding it very difficult online to see people making jokes about Mike Johnson and, you know, the porn alerts on his phone with his son and all these rumors that he has a Grindr account, because I got to tell you guys, I think Mike Johnson is one of the most dangerous figures associated with Trump right now, like easily top 5. You know, I kind of put him right up there behind Russ Vought and Stephen Miller. He's the Speaker of the House of Representatives. He's the 3rd in line to the presidency. He is routinely giving press conferences where he claims to not know about things that are actually happening around the country, not know that one of his own GOP reps has a restraining order against his girlfriend for domestic violence and threats and revenge porn, not know that Trump has made various allegations like out of left field that make no sense. It's almost as though, in fact, I know it is this, that Mike Johnson simply claims to not know about things that he doesn't want to have to respond to or be held accountable for. So we need to actually take very seriously what Mike Johnson is doing right now. It is a corruption and a violation of his oath of office to not swear her in. He particularly is advancing an agenda that he knows is false and dangerous to the American public. And the thing that has to be done here is that we have to treat him the way that we have treated every other opposition party figure, right? Every other person associated with MAGA. We have to exercise our influence. We have to pick up the phone and make phone calls to his office and tell him what we think. Please, if an intern happens to answer, be polite to them, but let them know where you stand. And I will tell you that also, because of how his Washington, D.C. office works, you are better off trying a local office. You can Google this. Every single representative has the phone numbers for their local offices, and there are multiple in the state usually. Local offices as well as their DC office. Start making your voice heard. Demand that she be sworn in. Make sure that you are telling them that you will support anybody who runs against him if he doesn't swear her in immediately. And again, call your own reps, right? Continue to call your own reps until she is sworn in, because they also have leverage and can put pressure on him. All right. I had a bunch of questions on the Patreon feed this morning about the Voting Rights Act case that was heard yesterday in front of the Supreme Court. I talked about this a little bit yesterday on the broadcast because the oral argument was ongoing while we were streaming. One of the things that folks need to understand is that we are not going to have a decision in this case until probably the end of this term, which is the end of June of 2026. All right. Lots of folks this morning on the feed, for some reason, asked me, what are we going to do if this goes badly? Okay. So the bad news is that we have no idea what's going to be contained in that opinion, even if it goes south. Okay. It could overturn the Voting Rights Act entirely, which would be horrific. It could overturn the Voting Rights Act in part, which would be bad. It could allow the Voting Rights Act to stand, which I don't think is terribly likely with this 6-3 majority. It could send it back down to the lower court for further determination. Okay. There's a lot of ways in which a ruling from the Supreme Court can go. And then on top of it, there's the language that is contained that justifies the ruling, right? Which gives some form of interpretation to how voting rights may or may not be preserved, overturned in this country going forward. All right. So I don't have an answer to the question of what are we going to do if this case goes south? Because that really entirely depends on what the ruling is from the Supreme Court. And we're going to have to wait for that. But I will say this. The antidote to any form of voter suppression is twofold. Okay. The first is you have to know what's going on in your state. You have to understand whether or not polling places are being shut down, how redistricting is working, and whether or not you have a leverage point to argue with your state representatives and senators to make sure that redistricting is done in a way that is fair. Whether or not you have an attorney general who might be on your side and seeking to kind of challenge how things are being done at the district level if there is a GOP state house and Senate in control of this. All right. There's a lot of ways to exercise local leverage, and you have to be aware of what's happening in your state because, as we've discussed many, many times here, elections are administered on a state and local level. They're not administered nationwide. What the Voting Rights Act sought to do was protect the rights of Black Americans to vote in specific, particular ways, all right? But how that is applied is going to be a state-based issue, okay? So if the Voting Rights Act is overturned, I wouldn't expect very much to change in California. But what's going to happen in the South, what's going to happen in states that have majority Black districts is a good question. And that is going to depend on local law. All right. So you all hear me say this a lot. You have to be deeply engaged politically in what's happening where you live, because the things that are going to impact how elections play out on a state and local and national level depend on you being engaged where you live. That's the first thing. The second thing I want to say about this is turnout. Okay. Because even assuming that the Voting Rights Act is overturned and then states start trying to do crazy things like voter ID, right? Like various means of poll taxing, which is something that existed during Jim Crow. You actually had to pay to vote, okay? There is going to need to be very serious direct organizing to turn out the vote and make sure that voters are protected when they show up to vote. And that is going to require, again, enormous mobilization at the local level, okay? So, one of the things that you can do here, if you are concerned about this, is to get involved in voting rights action networks where you live, right? If you live in the South, you should be tapped into Black Voters Matter, whatever your racial or ethnic identity. You should know what they are doing. You should know how to support them. The same is true, by the way, for Voto Latino, which activates Latino voters all across the country, right? There are indigenous voters projects that you can get involved in that do the same. One of the things that we have to remember here is that overwhelming turnout with effective voter protection can overcome anything that happens with the VRA. Now, is it going to be a really hard lift? Absolutely. Like, I'm not going to sit here and lie to you that it's not going to be exponentially harder if the VRA is overturned. But is it impossible? Absolutely not. It does require you, though, to be engaged right now. And again, I know I'm preaching to the choir for a lot of you in this audience, but seriously, if you are not right now hooked up with local organizations where you live that are in some way serving the general community, because that's, by the way, where people build relationships that motivate people to then actually go out and vote. If you're not doing that, now is the time. Like, we are like a year off from the midterms. If this decision doesn't drop until June, we're going to have all of our mobilization and organization already in place for the midterms. So now is the time. Like, now is the time. Yesterday was the time, but today's as good as not. All right. Really time to get engaged where you live in voting rights issues and to educate yourself about what's going on. All right. About an hour ago, a story broke, I believe on ABC, that there is a grand jury being impaneled today to try to indict John Bolton. Okay. So I have a couple things I have to say about this. First of all, grand jury indictments and the processes of grand juries are supposed to be secret. The fact that, yet again, against a perceived political enemy of Donald Trump, we are getting wind of a grand jury voting on an indictment before that has even happened is really disturbing from a legal and an ethical standpoint. The reason why grand jury proceedings are secret is because if somebody is not indicted, we do not want them to be tarred with the indictment process. Okay. This is one reason why, grand juries are impaneled all the time. And if an indictment isn't found, you never know about what they were investigating. Okay. There's really solid policy reasons for this. But in this era where, the Trump regime is trying to make a point of terrifying everybody who might oppose it, they're leaking information about grand jury votes. I presume it's coming from them. I don't know who else it would be coming from because it's happening in multiple jurisdictions to try to scare people into silence. All right. Now, I am no fan of John Bolton. You all know this for decades. And nonetheless, I do not want to see him indicted. And part of that is because this is a part of the weaponization of the Department of Justice to attack and indict and fundamentally imprison people who are perceived to have done things against the regime or against Trump's desired reputation. All right. And, one of the things that we have to be very cautious about here from a messaging standpoint, from a strategic standpoint, is that no matter how much we don't like someone, I said this about Jim Comey too, right? Can't stand that guy. Do I want him indicted by this regime? Hell no. And, for everybody who's out there like karma on Comey or on Bolton, my perspective on that is you have to be willing to stand up even for the persecution of your enemies by a fascist regime. Because if they come for John Bolton and they come for Jim Comey, some of us are going to be next. So I really hope he's not indicted today. Again, this would be a part of this rash of indictments by recent acting U.S. attorneys who have, replaced people who were nominated and confirmed. They are clearly acting only at the instruction of Pam Bondi and Donald Trump and his friends. This is something that, again, is not good. And, my perception at this point is that all of these cases are going to fall apart. Comey's star witness has already been on the record saying that Comey didn't tell him the thing that the indictment says he told him. So they don't even have a case in that one. Letitia James's indictment concerning the house she bought for her niece in Norfolk, Virginia is going to fall apart. This one might too, okay, if he is indicted. But all that said, we have to be willing to understand that, this is all a sign of rampant authoritarianism and corruption. And we have to stand up for everybody who is being persecuted by it, because if we don't, that means anyone is fair game. All right. So that's my little message about that. All right. Final thing that I just wanted to talk about today a little bit was news commentary and burnout. We actually have a video coming on Monday about political burnout in this era over on our sister channel for the Ripple Effect Institute. I will make sure that I link that channel up here, by the way, when we're done, so that those of you who are not subscribed over there yet can be. We do weekly videos on activism training and organizing over there that are really designed to get to the root of how to take action in this era and how to survive what we're living through. Political burnout is like rampant among people right now who have been at this work for a really long time, some of whom are clients of ours inside the Ripple Effect Institute. I am looking at you. Go by in the comments. You know who you are. One of the things that I just want to mention here, though, is that I said something about this morning on Blue Sky, because I am getting more and more disturbed by the idea, the fashion of news as entertainment on YouTube and on other platforms, on TikTok, right? With these flashy headlines and these big banner, screaming thumbnail images that are really designed to trigger us and fire our central nervous system so that we click out of panic or outrage and then generate profit for the creator, all right? I come on here every day, much like someone else who I follow, who I adore, Jess Craven, and I try very hard to give you guys concrete action items that you can take to fight back, to resist, to show up, to make your voices heard. All right. Part of the reason why so many of us are feeling really burnt out these days is because of the generation of these nonstop 9-minute, sometimes 15-minute videos that are like, oh my God, the sky is falling, everything's going to shit. Or the flip side of this are the videos that are like, this is the thing that'll finally take down Trump, right? Which is not the way any of this works, okay? The thing that's eventually going to take down Trump is the hard, daily, routine, committed work of organizers in this country, right? That's the truth. That's where the power lies, right? And if we could all just get in community with one another and be out there doing that work, we would actually all feel a lot better on top of everything else, right? Part of the problem right now is this constant immersion in generated news stories that's designed to make us upset for profit, which is, by the way, the handmaiden to the administration, even when it's coming from the left. Because what fascist regimes want more than anything is for people to be exhausted, isolated, burnt out, and alone, and having the sense that everything is hopeless, all right? Part of what's happening, unfortunately, is that as there is a rise on the left of commentators that are doing this, and you will notice that all of them have like very similar thumbnails these days, down to the same kinds of fonts, right? They're all like screaming with 16 exclamation points. One of the things to remember about this is that that mechanism that is driving your central nervous system insane for profit is also the root of your burnout, okay? So I just want people to understand that if you are listening to people and they are not on a regular basis giving you the means to fight back, giving you ideas about how to resist, giving you action items to undertake on a daily basis, which is, of course, one of the things that I try to do here, you need to ask yourself what purpose they are serving in terms of your life, right? Because there's a lot of ways to get informed. You can get informed by subscribing to a hard copy newspaper, which, by the way, I still do. I have a newspaper that lands on my front doorstep every day, and I read it, okay? You can also get informed from people who are not in the game of trying to make you more upset for money, right? You can subscribe to smaller channels. You can subscribe to people who are out here saying, take this action step, right? You can subscribe to creators who are in communication. Jess Craven and I, by the way, see each other on conference calls with Elizabeth Warren once a month, right? You can subscribe to people who actually are in conversation with others who are trying to move the needle, all right? I am just very, very concerned right now about what this is going to mean. You know, we are right now 10 months into this administration. We never know what's going to happen next. Anything could happen. But assuming that we've got at least 4 more years of this, there's no way that this particular type of generated news, let alone with 5 push notifications a day from every single channel, is going to sustain the people who are engaged in actually wanting to do the work. All right. So I want you all, for your own sakes, but also for the sake of movement building, to really ask yourself on a daily basis whether or not the news sources, quote unquote, because some of them are barely that you're consuming are actually furthering the cause of justice and freedom and liberation. Is that what they're doing? Or are they doing it for money? It's really important to evaluate like the underlying motives. And the easiest way to do this is to check and see whether or not the people that you are listening to are actually on a regular basis offering you skills, ideas, strategies, points, talking points on how you can fight back. Okay. If they're not doing that, I have huge question marks. And I'm telling you all of that because while I very much believe in truthful information, right? One of the whole reasons why this broadcast started almost 9 years ago was because I wanted people to have a layperson's understanding of the law and white collar law in particular and how it intersected with politics and activism under Trump 1.0. I just really right now watching the lay of the land and how it's developed, particularly since 2018, 2020, even during the middle of the pandemic, I'm really disturbed. Like I'm even feeling it myself when I wake up in the morning and I look at things online and instantly I'm like, heart pounding, like, oh my God, like here's another, this is all just such a shit show. Why, right? That's not healthy. It's actually not doing anything other than destroying our capacity to fight back. So I just wanted to mention it this morning because I personally am I don't know how the media ecosystem can continue like this, right? I don't understand what it is that people even think they're doing from a creator standpoint anymore with it. Because the flood of information isn't actually changing anything. And in fact, it's counterintuitive. It's working actually in favor of what the fascists want, which is for all of us to be burnt out and terrified. So, you can take a pause and I'll just mention, like, I read Heather Cox Richardson probably like, at this point, I probably read her twice a week. I don't read every single newsletter. I read the ones that, feel very informative from a historical perspective because I'm interested in how patterns repeat. I don't actually tend to read the ones that are just a regurgitation of what's happened in a given day because I know a lot of it already. But I find her useful. The historical perspective is useful, right? I do not watch her online though. I really read the newsletter and that's it. So, there are some people out there doing good work like that. And then there are other people who, frankly, at this point, completely disgust me because I can see what they're doing. And I am revolted sometimes by not just the means by which they're doing it, but by their ignorance. And they're out there, making hundreds of thousands of dollars a month, just jacking people's central nervous systems with pithy entertainment videos about people getting kidnapped by ICE. And that to me is just not helpful or relevant. All right. So that's my little rant for today, you guys. Thanks for being here. I want to remind everybody our new program, Power Lab, registration for it closes 2 weeks from today. That is our 7-week program for beginning and intermediate organizers to move from outrage to building community action. Very relevant to what I was just saying. If you want to join us, the link to do so is below in the show notes. It's also in the comments. Also make sure it's linked up here at the end of the show so that you can log on and do it right now if you would care to. We have a good group of people joining us for that already. Some of whom are alums, some of whom are brand new to us. I'm excited about that. And we will be here tomorrow at regular time. There will be a bonus broadcast tomorrow for our Patreon subscribers. Please head on over there and join us if you have not already. Again, reminder, the code to join us at 20% off annual subscriptions is fall 2025. And I will catch you all back here tomorrow. Thumbs up on this broadcast. Please drop me a comment if you haven't already. And I will see you all back here tomorrow. All right, bye. That's our show for today, folks. Thanks so much for being here at Resistance Live. To get more out of the show, including bonus broadcasts, the answers to all your most pressing political and legal questions, and way more, head on over to patreon.com/resistancelive and become a paid subscriber. And don't forget to hit subscribe here on your favorite podcasting platform to make sure that you never miss an episode. See you next time.